I am so delighted and honored to be here. And thank you to all of you out there that showed up to hear the story of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary and how we are affecting change in the world of cattle ranching and animal farming globally. I am a 62-year-old former cattle rancher. I got to be a cattle rancher kind of by accident. My husband was a cattle rancher, and we married for the second time in 2010. And being a good Texan, I loved the land, I loved the animals, but when it came to, appreciating the work that he did out there, sending those calves off to the sale barn, I didn't ever like it. And not only did I not like it, I began to be extremely agitated, affected, and depressed. And Tommy thought he would get me more involved in cattle ranching by recommending that I get a couple of calves that needed a mama. And so I bought a couple of calves up the road, and one of them happened to be Rowdy Girl. Yes, Rowdy Girl is a cow, and sometimes I don't know where she begins or I end. Because the story of Rowdy Girl Sanctuary and the evolution of the Rancher Advocacy Program really starts with this baby girl, Rowdy Girl. I began to bottle feed Rowdy Girl because she needed a mama. The other calf died prematurely. She never got colostrum and passed away. God rest her soul. But Rowdy Girl thrived, and she looked forward to me coming to feed her twice a day. She would bounce into the pasture where I was, and she wanted to be fed. And so as I was feeding her, I began to notice all the other cows in the pasture. And something strange began to happen. I love the name of this talk, the symbiotic relationship of ranching and plant futures. Because what happened to me is I began to get a symbiotic relationship with this young calf named Rowdy Girl. She began to show me distinctly that the cows out there in the pasture had lives of their own, that they appreciated their own lives, that they loved each other like family. They stuck together like family. I began to see who was who. I could tell who a babysitter was. I could tell which family group went together. And the weird thing about it is most every one of our cows were Black Angus. They all, for all practical purposes, looked just alike. Except when I started really focusing in on these babies and these mamas and these papas and these cousins and these aunts, I began to see them. Just like you and I can tell each other apart, I began to tell them apart. I don't know how this happened, except when I was feeding Rowdy Girl, she was feeding me. And when I would stop feeding Rowdy Girl, I had to go back to being a good rancher's wife. And being a good rancher's wife meant that I had to support the work my husband did. And we sent babies to the sale barn that got sold off and auctioned for slaughter. That's what we did. My husband's a multi-generational cattle rancher, and his great grandpa, brought cows in from the big range in San Antonio, and herded them in just like the old days with a brand and spurs, and he had slaughterhouses and all that. So, my husband comes from that tradition, that culture. And so he honored that. And when I started having issues, he did not like it. But what happened, long story short, because this isn't a real long talk, so I'm going to kind of fast forward for a minute. And this Texas girl that went to rodeos, that had a collection of leather boots, that wore leather clothes, all of a sudden, I began to question everything it meant to be a cattle rancher, to be a Texan. I began to question everything that we did. I began to look up what we did, in videos. I started seeing horrific footage in slaughterhouses. And I kept thinking, this couldn't possibly be true, that somehow, that the information I was getting was false, that it was fabricated, that it was inflated and made up. But the more I researched, the more I discovered that it was absolutely the truth. So I went from being a cattle rancher to, okay, I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to start getting my milk from a dairy next door. I'm going to get local milk, local cheese, local butter. And by God, we're going to kill one of our own cows. If we're going to be a cattle rancher, then we're going to do it right. I'm sick and tired of seeing these babies go off to the sale barn every 6 months. So if we're going to really be a cattle rancher, Tommy, we need to kill one of our own. And Tommy said, Renee, I can't do that. I said, well, why not? And he said, because, I don't really want to answer this question. He said, but you keep forcing the issue. He said, I can't eat a cow, I know. And, a light bulb went off inside of me because, I always prided myself in being a person that, I like my insides to match my outsides. Like, I don't like to live a double life or a lie. And something about the fact that we could eat the flesh of animals from the grocery store, but we couldn't eat the flesh of animals in our own pastures. Something began to twist off in me, and that was the beginning of me going vegan for the animals. Rowdy Girl and I developed a very deep bond. In fact, back there, you can see those pictures. Those are Rowdy Girl, and that's one of her babies, Houdini. We forged a bond. We forged a relationship that eventually took me to a place where I had a showdown with my husband in the pasture. I not only began to watch all those videos, I began to suffer deeply. I became extremely depressed. Started calling my husband a murderer. And Tommy was like, Renee, how can you call me a murderer? You still eat filet mignons. And I did. And so something in me began to break. I never had a vegan activist hollering, waving a flag, had a bullhorn, throwing blood on them. I never had one of those vegan activists. My vegan activist was Rowdy Girl. And when I started losing my mind and my sanity, on October 31st, 2014, I'll never forget it. I was watching a dissertation from Melanie Joy called Carnism. And she was telling the story. Melanie Joy, PhD, look her up. She was telling the story about a family that was enjoying beef stew. And they were talking about how wonderful it tasted. And then somebody said, what's the recipe? And she said, well, you start off with a pound of very young golden retriever. Now, granted, this is Halloween Day, 2014. All of a sudden, the horror of the fact that I could be eating the chopped up body parts of a baby dog freaked me out. I don't know. There was something about that moment in time that culminated with all those slaughterhouse videos and everything else. There was something that happened that I don't know. I almost lost it. I went to the party that night at my mother-in-law's house. She always had it every Halloween for the kids. We had a big block party. They had their Halloween outfits on. It was a big family event. And we got there and all the family was there. And my mother-in-law, God rest her soul, was serving, you guessed it, beef stew. My ears started ringing. The room went white. And I just said out loud, I can't eat that. The room was looking at me. Everybody in the room was looking at me. And she said, well, why not, Renee? I said, because it's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it. For the first time in my life, I called it what it was. My insides came into my outsides and I became vegan like that. When that happened, right then and there, everybody looked at me and they were like, what did you say? And I was like, it's got floating dead, hacked up animal bodies in it. I don't know what it is. It could be anybody. It could be a puppy. It could be a person. Who knows what all those chopped up pieces of meat is? And so anyway, from that moment on, I went vegan. I had a showdown with my husband. A month or so later, I had started a blog called Vegan Journal of a Rancher's Wife. And I had a lot of confidence built up. Kip Anderson, Howard Lyman, a bunch of folks got behind me and helped me do a fundraiser. And I went to my husband and I said, look, he was going to sell all the cows. He was going to sell every single one of the cows, get out of the business, because I was making it so terribly difficult for him. And he said, Renee, you need to just get out of my business. And I wouldn't get out of his business. You know, I had gone vegan. I was living with the cows. I wouldn't even come home until late at night. I just hung out with the cows, y'all, because I couldn't stand being home. I didn't like all the meat in the house. I didn't like the animal heads on the walls. I felt like I was just being tortured. And so I went to him and I said, look, if you're going to sell all these cows, then sell them to me. He said, sell them to you? I said, yeah, sell them to your wife. How much would you sell them to your wife for? If you're going to sell them all anyway, sell them to me. And see, I had been building up my confidence secretly on this very, very private journal on Facebook that he didn't know about. And that's how I got the confidence. And he said, okay, Renee, and he didn't know about this. He said, I'll play along. I can get 40,000 at the sale barn. I'll sell them to you for 30. I said, all right, you got a deal. Well, in less than 4 months, long story short, I bought my husband's cows. I raised $36,000 in less than 4 months, bought his cows, and started the first ever beef cattle ranch conversion that's documented in history. And it happens to be in the middle of Texas. I didn't do any of this on purpose. I didn't have a business plan. I didn't have a marketing plan. And what started out as just sheer passion, sheer determination, became a phenomenon, y'all. CBS Evening News came to the house. Southwest Airlines was doing our story. ABC, NBC, Animal Planet, you name it. Our story started just going all over the place. It's been translated in 9 or 10 different languages. We're in the midst of a global revolution with the Rancher Advocacy Program, because what happened is my story, the heart of a cattle rancher's wife, started landing in the laps of everyday people all over the world. It just started landing in their laps because we were on TV. And or they were on the airplane, pre-COVID, reading the Southwest Airlines magazine. And the next thing you know, people were saying, oh my God, honey, come listen to this. And as a result, the first ever beef cattle ranch conversion became Rancher Advocacy Program. And now we're helping other ranchers with the RAP Summit. Thank you.
Renee, thank you so much. I'm glowing with watching some of the comments, the reactions, the way you're inspiring people, your passion, your sense of purpose. I love your admission to not really having a plan, but following your instinct, following your heart, following your moral compass. You've expressed a story of moral hunger. You came face to face, literally, with that question in your life, and you addressed it with such courage. And I'm hoping that things are good with your husband. You get through.
He's vegan.
He's vegan. It's okay. That's the amazing punchline.
He's co-founder.
Okay.
He's co-founder of Rowdy
So
Girl, now.
So
absolutely.
Tell us more about the Rancher Advocacy Program. How do other people become enrolled in this now? How's this growing? How is your passion spreading? And talk to us a little bit too, maybe about the economics of this. It's no easy task for any kind of a farmer, rancher to transition from, a business or a multi-generational investment into something new. How does the Rancher Advocacy Program help people who embrace your philosophy to transition?
Yeah, that is a great question. The Rancher Advocacy Program has a summit. We have a summit now. It's called the RAP Summit. We've had one, and we had over 500 registrations in 18 countries represented. And our next one is February the 6th. What I'm doing, and you can register, you can even come for free or you can donate. But this summit is addressing all of these questions, because I am, you know what I'm good at? I'm good at telling the story. I'm good at getting the people together. I'm good at believing that it can be done, because if I can do it, if we can do it, anybody can do it. We turned our formal cattle ranch into a phenomenon, and a nonprofit. We have a organic farm. It's not profitable, but what happened is our former cattle ranch became a nonprofit. I don't recommend that every former cattle ranch is going to do that, because you have to, what we're doing when you're on the tip of the spear, well, I've been called a pioneer. I've been called all kinds of things. Believe me, a pioneer is a nice word. But when you are pioneering something, you don't have anything in front of you. All you have is your belief and your passion and your determination and your vision to know that it's time. We are on the forefront of a global revolution, and we're making history as we help liberate our planet by ending one of the most horrific things, animal agriculture. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to start talking about it, and you have to start assessing situations. We've got two cattle rancher families that are local that are starting to change. One of them went totally vegan. I'm like at our summit on February the 6th, we have Jay and Katja Wild in the UK. They are going to be on the summit along with another farm transition organization called Refarmed. We're going to be talking about how they transitioned to oat milk. They actually went from, giving all their cows away to a sanctuary in 2017, and now they are working to become a oat milk producer. So wow. There's so many, and one of the things we got to realize is, like, I got an Instagram message from a little young farmer, rancher in Australia, because I get messages from all over. Guess how many acres they have? 5.8 million. So when you consider that, it's outback. So when you consider that your ranching community is going to be everything from 20 acres to 5 million acres, you can't just wrap your head around this at once. We've got to start talking about this. That's why the RAP Summit is bringing together industry leaders, plant-based food producers, scientists, technologists, funders. We're bringing academics. We're bringing all the minds together to answer the question: what can farmers do on their land to thrive without using animals? And this is how we're going to answer it. This is how we're going to do it.
Renee, this is so exciting. And, I'm thinking about we've got almost 240 people here with us this morning, and many of them are actually business school students at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business. And I'm wondering if there are maybe opportunities for some of them to collaborate with you and, work through some of the more challenging aspects of this. There's another initiative at UC Berkeley, and I'm just going to tell everybody we're going to go a little bit longer than scheduled with Renee. We're trying to find our next speaker, Emma, who may be trying to navigate getting into Hopin. So we have a few more minutes, Renee. But I was going to mention that we have another initiative at UC Berkeley that's been focused on helping restaurant owners and operators transition to being able to pay a living wage to their workers, because, as you know, in many states, they rely on tips. The workers really rely on tips to get to make up to a living wage, because the minimum wage is so low. So anyway, just as an aside, we did a project with one of our business school classes to help develop models for restaurant operators to work through a transition to be able to include tips in their menu pricing. So I'm just wondering too, there may be opportunities to think about how to, how to get from the powerful sense of purpose that you've discovered to the economic reality of staying in, in business and having a livelihood, which I can imagine would be a profound question for a rancher.
And this is what we're doing. We're answering all those questions. I mean, there's a hemp farmer. His name is Mike, that's working with with another farm transformation organization. See, when I first started doing this, there wasn't anybody else doing it, and so I just kept believing that it could happen. But Rancher Advocacy Program has worked on business models. We worked on a business model to convert a chicken farm to a mushroom farm. You know, we have that business model, and it can work. But one of the things you've got to understand is most of the farmers are like indentured servants. They're like serfs. They depend so much on big ag, because it's not like it was in the old days where you had your own farm. All these farmers today are attached to what's called integrators. And, they're incentivized to do things fast, to make animals fat, quick, and they bring them, and they do all this, and they keep them always like needing more money. And they don't ever get ahead. So what we're trying to do, and that's why on this next summit, we're bringing in the Agriculture Fairness Alliance, which is a lobbying group. See, until we start systemically changing the way our government also treats animal ag, we as a plant-based vegan community must get together, and we must get lobbyists in Congress, so see, I'm on the board of AFA, and we have legislation called the At-Risk Farmer Transition Act, and we're trying to get this into a bill, because right now there's all these subsidies go to ranchers that all these ranchers that lose animals because of one reason or the other. They get more money.
I love, Renee, you're spelling out the systemic nature, the systems change that has to take place. You've got an inspiring story. Our next speaker has arrived. I'm going to keep moving, son. I want to invite everybody to come to that Rancher Advocacy Summit. We've got the website address in our chat, and for anyone that can donate to the cause, we're inspired. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to encourage everybody to go over to the sessions button on the left and meet us in the next room in the session with Emma Jagaz about a young farmer's view.
Thank you so much.
See you, Renee. Bye.
Been a real pleasure. See you later. Bye-bye.